Hello, educators. Today we're going to talk about how educators can create a positive climate in an online classroom. So I have a few steps so we can attain this. The first step is to build a community in your classroom. While teaching online last year, I found using restorative practices to be a great tool to creating a community in your online classroom. So, restorative practices are a framework for building community and for responding to challenging behaviors through authentic dialogue. When we are doing Restorative Circle, it looks very similar to a sharing portion of morning meeting, and it can be conducted after a traditional morning meeting. So, this is where students are able to collaborate with peers and authentically share based on the conversation for the day. Some conversations will be about community building and can be fun and light. And then there are other days where we are responding to something that happened in the classroom or something that happened in the community that needs to be talked about. Um, and students have the opportunity to share how they feel about what happened, and everyone has a chance to speak without being spoken over. In a traditional classroom, this would be done with a talking piece where a student's holding an object and everyone knows it's their turn to talk. Online, I used popsicle sticks, so I would pull a student's name and I would call them, and they would know it's their turn. Although it's not ideal to the same format and environment that restorative circles look like in class, it still allows us to build a community within the classroom and allows students to have a great collaboration with peers. The second step is building a sense of safety and respect. I found it to be really important to learn our students' names and make sure that we're pronouncing them correctly every time. This is such a simple way to show respect to a student or really anyone out in the community. Next, I would focus on addressing and acknowledging problems, no matter how small. My mindset is always in first grade, as that's where my experience has mostly been. So, understanding that students may feel that something small to us is a big problem for them. And when we acknowledge that we understand, they have more respect and feel safer in the classroom. While in the classroom, we also want to create some safe spaces so students can not only express themselves, but also work through any big emotions they have. This can be any space in your classroom where a student can work through their big emotions. Um, this area is called a whole bunch of different things depending on what school you're working in. I've heard it as a recovery area, cozy corner, calm down area. All of these are very similar in the fact that it's a safe space for students to go when they are feeling overwhelmed with big emotions, and it gives them steps on um, how to go through those emotions and have a resolution at the end. It's also important to make sure that we are celebrating students' individuality and cultures. When they notice that you have an interest in their culture or home life, they tend to have a little bit more respect towards you because you are showing an interest in their own individuality. One of the most important ways we can create safety in our classroom is to make sure that we are setting explicit expectations. So when we set explicit expectations, the students know exactly what is expected of them. So a student has no gray area of what is expected of them in the classroom. Since we are online, we want to think about what we expect students to be like in our online platforms. So for Zoom, you might want your students to have all their mics off, but have their camera on. Maybe you want them to have a piece of paper and pencil nearby to do some work on a piece of paper. There's a lot of different expectations that you can set, but you want to make sure that they're explicit and they're grade level appropriate. So for your younger students, you really don't want more than 4 or 5 expectations. And you want to make sure that you explicitly model it in the beginning of the school year so your students know exactly what needs to be done. Another really important way to set a positive climate in your classroom is to build connections with families. We need to make sure that we are setting multiple pathways for families to reach us through phone, email, parent communication apps, newsletters, all the different ways to connect so the families have an opportunity to pick which way is most comfortable for them. I've had many families prefer just using our parent communication apps, while I've had some other families that really like to have a conversation on the phone. I recommend that you reach out to families at minimum weekly. This can be simple as sending an email with a newsletter or sending a message on the parent communication app, checking in to see if anyone has any questions or concerns for that week. I found it really helpful for myself and families to provide office hours at the end of, I usually did it at the end of the day where families could meet with me virtually and ask questions. And it was an opportunity where families asked a lot of the same questions, so I was able to answer the questions more efficiently. I also created some videos to help families navigate through learning platforms with their students. So, similar to a screencast, making sure that either I'm creating a video on Zoom and sharing my screen or creating a screencast so they can see how to navigate through all of the platforms and materials their students will be engaging in. Lastly, we need to make sure that we show we genuinely care. We want our students to feel loved, respected, safe in our classrooms. And when we show that we genuinely care, they tend to feel the way that we want them to in our classroom. So, again, make sure you're pronouncing their name right. We want to show a true interest in their interests and continue to bring them up. If a student's telling you that they love sharks, find some ways to incorporate it into the math word problem of the day. Or maybe assign some books on Epic for them to read that are on their level about sharks. Sending personal notes or little pictures to them. Nonverbal and verbal affirmations. So nonverbal online could be while you're on Zoom, send them some notes of how amazing they're doing, or send them some cute little emojis just to get their motivation up. You can also do verbal affirmations and just give them a little shout out when they're getting their answers correct. Make sure we're sending feedback in a timely manner so they know how they are doing in their class. One of the most important things you can do is to be your authentic self. If you are not being your authentic self and you're trying to be another teacher, your students know that you're being fake. So make sure that you are being authentic and real with your students, and they will have that respect for you and they'll know that you genuinely care. Through all of these steps, you will have a positive climate in your classroom.